The mining station on Kepler 442b hummed with the constant vibration of heavy machinery. Commander Sarah Chun wiped sweat from her brow as she reviewed the daily extraction reports. 3 months into their mission, and the human colony was finally hitting their quotas. The rare earth minerals buried in this planet's crust would fuel humanity's expansion into the outer rim for decades to come. Commander, we have visitors approaching, Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the communications console. His voice carried an edge that made Sarah look up from her datapad. Visitors? Out here. Sarah moved to the main view screen. Kepler 442b sat on the edge of known space, far from any established trade routes. The nearest inhabited system was 2 weeks away by faster-than-light drive. 3 ships, ma'am. Unknown configuration. They're not broadcasting any identification signals, but they're not showing hostile intent either. Just sitting there. Sarah studied the alien vessels displayed on screen. They were elegant in a way that human ships never managed to be. Where human engineering favored function over form, these ships looked like they had been grown rather than built. Organic curves swept along their hulls, and what appeared to be crystalline structures jutted from their surfaces like frozen lightning. Any response to our hailing frequencies? Nothing, Commander. They've been silent for the past 20 minutes. Sarah considered her options. First contact protocols were clear, but they had been written for encounters near human space, not on the frontier. She was a mining engineer, not a diplomat, but out here she was the highest-ranking officer within light years. Continue attempting communication. All mining operations are suspended until we know what we're dealing with. Bring the defensive systems online, but don't target them. I don't want to start a war because of a misunderstanding. The waiting stretched for another hour. The alien ships maintained their position in high orbit, neither advancing nor retreating. Sarah had begun to wonder if this was some kind of test when the communication console finally chirped to life. Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect standard English. Sarah frowned. That's impossible. Run it through the translation matrix anyway. See if there's something we're missing. No, ma'am, you don't understand. They're speaking English. Not translated, not approximated. Perfect, unaccented English. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, Sarah was looking at a being that was unmistakably alien, yet hauntingly familiar. The creature stood roughly human height, but its proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, with elongated limbs that moved with liquid grace. Its skin held a pale blue tint that seemed to shift in the light, and its eyes were larger than human eyes, a deep violet color that seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom. But it was the clothing that caught Sarah's attention. The being wore what could only be described as a uniform, cut in a style that reminded her of historical Earth military dress. Formal, precise, and somehow familiar despite its obvious alien origin. Greetings, Commander Chun, the being said, and its voice carried the same unnatural perfection as its English. I am Tribune Zarahai of the Ethereal Collective. We have been monitoring your operations on this world. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. They knew her name. They had been watching. Tribune, I'm honored by this contact. Might I ask how you came to know our language so well? Something flickered across the alien's features. If Sarah didn't know better, she might have called it sadness. Your language is not unknown to us, Commander. In fact, it is quite familiar. But that is a conversation for another time. We have come because your mining operations have disturbed something that should have remained buried. I'm not sure I understand. Our geological surveys showed no signs of previous habitation or archaeological significance. Your surveys would not have detected what lies beneath. It is old, Commander Chun. Older than your species' recorded history. Older than many species' recorded histories. And it is dangerous. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly are we talking about, Tribune? My ancestors once fought a war on this world. A terrible war against forces that threatened all sentient life in this region of the galaxy. The battlefield was sealed, buried under kilometers of rock and sediment. Your mining operation has reached the edge of that ancient site. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying there's some kind of weapon down there? Not a weapon, Commander. Something far more dangerous. A person. Before Sarah could respond to that cryptic statement, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The night shift mining supervisor's voice crackled over the intercom, thick with panic. Commander Chin to mine shaft 7 immediately. We've got a situation. A big situation. Sarah looked back at the screen, but Tribune Zurahai was gone. The communication had been severed. Through the viewport, she could see the 3 alien ships beginning to descend toward the planet's surface. The ride to mine shaft 7 took 15 minutes in the rover, 15 minutes during which Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Ancient battlefields, buried dangers, an alien species that spoke perfect English and knew her name. Nothing about this situation made sense. Mine Shaft 7 was the deepest of their operations, pushing down toward the planet's mantle where the richest mineral deposits lay hidden. As Sarah arrived at the site, she could see that something had gone wrong. The massive drilling equipment sat silent, and emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie red glow. Supervisor Martinez met her at the entrance to the mining complex. He was a veteran of 3 different world-cracking operations, a man who had seen everything the universe could throw at human engineering. Sarah had never seen him look scared before. "Commander, you need to see this. About an hour ago, we broke through into some kind of chamber. Natural formation, we thought at first. But then, the readings started going crazy." He led her down into the depths of the mine, past layers of equipment and emergency barriers that had been hastily erected. The air grew colder as they descended, and Sarah began to notice a strange quality to the light. It seemed to shift and shimmer, as if the air itself was somehow different down here. The drill bit went through about 20 meters of solid rock, then just dropped. Free fall for almost 100 meters before it hit something solid. When we sent down the camera probes, we found this. They emerged onto a platform that looked out into a vast underground cavern. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The space was enormous, easily large enough to hold a small city. But it wasn't the size that stunned her. It was what the space contained. The cavern was filled with the remnants of some ancient battle. Massive structures that might once have been war machines lay scattered across the floor, their metal surfaces corroded but still recognizably artificial. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls and ceiling, but these weren't natural crystals. They pulsed with a faint inner light that cast strange shadows throughout the space. And in the center of it all, on a raised platform that seemed to be carved from a single piece of black stone, lay a figure. Even from this distance, Sarah could see that it was humanoid. It lay perfectly still, arms crossed over its chest, surrounded by what appeared to be some kind of energy field that distorted the air around it. "Commander, that's not the strangest part," Martinez said quietly. "Watch this." He activated a control on his datapad, and suddenly, Sarah could hear sound from the cavern below. At first, it was just the ambient noise of air moving through the vast space. But then she heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady, rhythmical breathing. "It's alive," Sarah whispered. "More than that, Commander. Look at the energy readings." Sarah glanced at Martinez's datapad and felt her world shift. The power signature coming from the sleeping figure was massive. Whatever it was generating enough energy to power their entire mining operation. And, according to the readings, that energy output was increasing. How long has it been like this? The energy started spiking about 30 minutes ago, right around the time those alien ships showed up in orbit. Sarah felt pieces of a vast puzzle beginning to click together in her mind. The alien ships, the Tribune who spoke perfect English, the ancient battlefield, and now a sleeping figure that was beginning to wake up after who knew how many centuries. Her communicator chirped. "Commander Chin, this is Rodriguez. The alien ships have landed near Mining Site 7. They're requesting permission to approach your location." Sarah looked down at the sleeping figure and made a decision that would change everything. "Grant permission, Lieutenant." "And Rodriguez?" "Yes, ma'am. Bring me everything we have on ancient human mythology. Specifically, anything about sleeping warriors and legendary swords." "Ma'am." "Just do it, Lieutenant. I have a feeling we're about to need all the historical context we can get." As if responding to her words, the energy field around the sleeping figure flared brighter, and, for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw the figure's eyes open. Human eyes, blue as Earth's sky and filled with an awareness that seemed to span centuries. Tribune Zarahai arrived at the mining site with an escort of 6 other ethereals, all of them wearing the same military-style uniforms. But it was Zarahai who drew Sarah's attention. Up close, the alien's features seemed even more familiar somehow, as if Sarah was looking at a distant relative she had never met. Commander Chin, thank you for allowing us to approach. I realize this situation must be confusing. That's an understatement, Tribune. My people just uncovered what appears to be an ancient battlefield with a sleeping humanoid at the center. Care to explain how your people know about a 1,000-year-old human burial site? Zarahai exchanged glances with her escorts. Commander, I think there may be some confusion. The figure your people have disturbed is not human. At least, not entirely. What do you mean, not entirely? Perhaps it would be better to show you. With your permission, we would like to examine the burial chamber. There are precautions that need to be taken. Sarah studied the alien's face, trying to read expressions that were simultaneously foreign and familiar. Every instinct told her to be cautious. But the alternative was to face whatever was happening down there without any guidance at all. All right, Tribune. But my people stay with us. This is still a human operation. Of course, Commander. But I must warn you, what we are about to show you will challenge many of your assumptions about your species' history. The descent into the burial chamber was surreal. The ethereals moved with a confidence that spoke of familiarity, as if they had been in this place before. They carried devices that Sarah didn't recognize, sensors that hummed with energy signatures unlike anything in human technology. As they approached the platform where the sleeping figure lay, Zarahai raised one of her devices and began taking readings. The expression on her face grew more grave with each passing moment. How long since your people first breached the chamber? She asked. About 2 hours, Sarah replied. The energy readings have been climbing steadily since then. Then, we may already be too late for a controlled awakening. Commander, what I am about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully. The figure in that chamber is one of your ancestors, but not in the way you might think. Sarah felt frustration building. Tribune, I appreciate that you're trying to help, but I need straight answers. What is that thing, and why is it waking up now? Zarahai turned to face her directly, those deep violet eyes meeting Sarah's gaze. 1,000 years ago, Commander, there was a war. Not between species, but between ideologies. Between those who believed that consciousness was sacred and must be preserved, and those who believed that consciousness was a resource to be harvested. The Devourers, one of Zarahai's escorts said quietly. The word carried weight, as if it held ancient terror. The Devourers were not evil in any way that your species would understand, Zarahai continued. They were simply hungry. They consumed consciousness, absorbed the thoughts and memories and experiences of entire civilizations. To them, sentient beings were food. Sarah felt her skin crawl. And this figure? Was one of the champions who fought against them. But not one of my people, Commander. One of yours. That's impossible. Humans didn't have space travel 1,000 years ago. We were barely past the medieval period. Earth humans, yes. But your species is older than you know, Commander Chen. Much older, and far more widespread. The figure in that chamber is from one of the first human colonies, established long before your recorded history began. When the Devourer War came to this region, the colonies sent their greatest warriors to fight. The sleeping figure stirred, and suddenly, the energy readings spiked dramatically. Throughout the chamber, the crystalline formations began to pulse with brighter light. She's waking up, Zarahai said softly. After 1,000 years, she's finally waking up. She? Sarah asked. Commander, meet your ancestor. The last knight of the Starfall Legion. The one your people called the Eternal Guardian. Zarahai paused, and when she continued, her voice held something that might have been reverence. Her name is Lyra Starweaver, and she carries one of the 7 World-Breaker swords forged to fight the Devourers. As if responding to her name, the figure on the platform sat up abruptly. The energy field around her collapsed, and for the first time in a millennium, Lyra Starweaver opened her eyes and looked upon the world of the living. She was human, definitely human, but like no human Sarah had ever seen. Tall and lean, with silver hair that seemed to hold starlight, and skin that was pale as moonlight but somehow radiated health and vitality. She wore armor that looked like it had been forged from liquid metal, and across her back was a sword that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The weapon was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its blade seemed to be made of crystallized energy, and Sarah could feel power radiating from it even from across the chamber. This wasn't just a sword. This was something that could reshape reality itself. Lyra Starweaver looked around the chamber, her gaze taking in the ethereals, the human miners, the strange mix of ancient technology and modern equipment. When her eyes met Sarah's, Sarah felt a shock of recognition that went deeper than genetics. This was what humanity could become. This was what they had been. When Lyra spoke, her voice carried the same perfect clarity as the ethereal's English, but with an accent that Sarah somehow knew was purely human. "How long?" she asked simply. "1,000 years," Zarahai answered. "The war is over. The Devourers are gone. You can rest now." Lyra stood, and Sarah was struck by the fluid grace of her movements. This was someone who had been trained for war from childhood, someone who had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of combat. "The war is over," Lyra repeated slowly. "And yet I wake. That means only one thing." She turned to look directly at Sarah, and Sarah felt the full weight of that ancient gaze. "They're coming back, aren't they?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the mining complex. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communicators, thick with panic. "Commander Chun, we have multiple contacts dropping out of FDL at the edge of the system. Large ships, unknown configuration. They're not responding to hails. And, Commander," his voice broke slightly, "they're heading straight for us." Lyra Starweaver reached over her shoulder and drew her sword. The blade sang as it cleared its sheath, a sound like crystal bells and distant thunder. The weapon blazed with inner light, and suddenly, Sarah understood why it had taken 1,000 years for its wielder to wake up. The sword had been waiting for the enemy to return. The ascent from the burial chamber happened in a blur of emergency lights and shouted commands. Lyra Starweaver moved like liquid lightning, her ancient armor adapting to the modern mining equipment as if it had been designed for this moment. Sarah struggled to keep up as they raced toward the surface, her mind reeling from everything she had learned in the past few hours. "Commander, status report." She called into her communicator as they reached the main mining complex. 37 unknown vessels have entered the system," Rodriguez's voice crackled back. "They're massive, ma'am. Each one is at least twice the size of our largest colony ships. And, Commander, they're not slowing down." Sarah looked at Lyra, who had moved to one of the observation windows and was studying the sky above. Even without enhanced optics, the ancient warriors seemed to be seeing something that escaped everyone else. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "At their current velocity, approximately 4 hours until they reach Kepler, 442b. Tribune Zarahai answered. She had produced another of her strange devices and was taking readings from the approaching ships. "But, Commander Chun, these are not Devourer vessels." Lyra turned from the window, her expression grim. "No, they're not. There's something new. Something that learned from the Devourer's mistakes." "Learned from them how?" Sarah demanded. "I thought you said the war was over, that the Devourers were gone." "The Devourers as we knew them are gone," Lyra confirmed. "But consciousness is stubborn, Commander Chun. It finds ways to survive, even when the body dies. Especially when the consciousness in question has consumed millions of other minds." The implications of that statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You're saying they came back?" "I'm saying they never really left. They just evolved." Lyra moved to another console and began interfacing with the mining station's computers. Sarah watched in amazement as the ancient warrior's hands moved over controls that shouldn't have made sense to someone from 1,000 years ago. "How are you doing that?" Sarah asked. "Technology changes, but the underlying principles remain the same. Besides, some things are universal." Lyra's fingers danced across the controls, and, suddenly, the main screen filled with tactical data that made Sarah's stomach drop. The approaching ships weren't just large. They were colossal. Each one was a flying city, bristling with weapon systems that Sarah's tactical training couldn't even begin to categorize. But it wasn't the weapons that made her blood run cold. It was the energy signatures. "Those ships are alive," she whispered. "Not alive," Lyra corrected grimly. "But not dead either." There's something in between. The Devourers learned that consuming consciousness was inefficient. Too much waste. So they found a better way. Which is, they became the ships, the weapons, the technology itself. Every vessel you see out there contains thousands of consumed minds, all working in perfect, terrible harmony. Lyra's hand moved to rest on the hilt of her sword. They're not here to conquer this world, Commander Chin. They're here to process it. Tribune Zarahai moved to join them at the console. The collective has 18 ships in this system. We can evacuate your people, but we cannot stand against a fleet of this size. We're not running, Sarah said firmly. This is a human colony. These are human people. We don't abandon our own. Commander, with all due respect, you don't understand what you're facing, Zarahai replied. The Devourers consumed 36 civilizations before we found a way to stop them. What comes for you now is everything they learned from those victories. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. She's right, Commander. Your people can't fight this. But I can. You're one person, Sarah protested. Ancient warrior or not, you can't take on 37 ships. No, Lyra agreed. But I don't have to. I just need to take on one. She pointed to the largest ship in the approaching fleet, a vessel that dwarfed even the others. The flagship, the core mind. Destroy that. And the others become lost, confused. They'll retreat to regroup, giving your people time to evacuate. And how exactly do you propose to reach an enemy flagship that's currently 4 hours out and surrounded by 36 other ships? Lyra smiled, and for the first time since awakening, she looked truly alive. The same way I did it 1,000 years ago. I improvise. She moved to another console and began pulling up schematics for the mining operation. Commander, your people have been digging deep into this planet's crust. How deep? Mine shaft 7 reaches down almost 50 kilometers. We were pushing for the mantle layer. Perfect. And you've been using fusion charges for the deep excavation. Controlled fusion, yes. It's the only way to break through some of the harder rock formations down there. Lyra's smile widened. Controlled fusion. Shaped charges. Deep shafts with precise angles. She turned to face Sarah directly. Commander Chun, your people have been building me a weapon. Sarah stared at the ancient warrior in disbelief. You want to turn our mining operation into some kind of cannon? Not a cannon. A railgun. A planetary-scale railgun that can accelerate a projectile to near light speed. Lyra began pulling up more detailed schematics, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had spent lifetimes working with technology. The fusion charges provide the initial acceleration. The mine shafts create a series of magnetic acceleration chambers. And the planet's own rotation gives us the trajectory we need. That's impossible, Sarah breathed. Even if the physics worked, which I'm not sure they do, you'd need a projectile that could survive that kind of acceleration and still maintain coherence at the target. Lyra drew her sword, and the blade sang as it caught the light. I have a projectile. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at the ancient weapon, then back at Lyra's face, searching for any sign that this was some kind of joke. She found none. You're talking about launching yourself at an enemy ship at near light speed. I've done worse. 1,000 years ago. The principle is the same. Besides, the sword will protect me. That's what it was made for. Lyra touched the crystal blade gently, almost lovingly. This weapon was forged in the heart of a dying star, Commander Chun. It's designed to cut through reality itself. A little thing like relativistic acceleration won't hurt it. Tribune Zarahai had been quietly monitoring the approaching fleet, but now she turned to join the conversation. Lyra Starweaver, even if your plan works, even if you reach the flagship intact, you'll be alone against thousands of consumed minds. I won't be alone, Lyra replied quietly. I never am. Before anyone could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout the complex again. This time, it wasn't an incoming fleet that triggered them. It was something much closer. Commander, we're detecting movement in the burial chamber. Martinez's voice came over the communicator. The crystalline formations are activating. All of them. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. Activating how? They're singing, Commander. All of them, in harmony. And the energy readings are off the charts. Lyra was already moving toward the chamber entrance. They know I'm awake, she said grimly. The crystals are resonance markers, left by my fellow knights. They're activating because they sense the approaching threat. Fellow knights. Sarah hurried to follow her. You said you were the last. I am the last alive, Lyra corrected. But death is not always the end for a knight of the Starfall Legion. Sometimes it's just a change of state. They reached the burial chamber to find it transformed. Where before the crystalline formations had pulsed with faint light, now they blazed like miniature suns. And from each one came a sound that was part music, part harmonic resonance, and part something else entirely. It was the sound of voices. Ancient voices, speaking in languages that predated human civilization. And somehow, impossibly, Sarah understood every word. Sister, you wake at last. The enemy returns, but we are ready. The circle closes, as was foretold. 7 swords, 7 knights, 7 souls bound to protect the future. Lyra stood in the center of the chamber, her own sword blazing with answering light. Brothers, sisters, I hear you. But I am alone now. The others are gone. No, sister. We are here. We have always been here, waiting for this moment. One of the largest crystals pulsed brighter than the rest. And suddenly, Sarah could see something inside it. A figure, tall and noble, wearing armor similar to Lyra's but with different markings. Another knight, preserved not in flesh but in crystalline memory. The enemy thinks they have learned from their defeat, the voice continued. But we have learned as well. We have been preparing for their return. Lyra moved closer to the crystal, and Sarah saw tears in the ancient warrior's eyes. Kale, is it really you? What remains of me, sister? What remains of all of us? We bound our souls to these crystals when we fell, preserving our knowledge and our power for this day. More voices joined in, coming from crystals throughout the chamber. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The reunion of warriors who had died 1,000 years ago but had found a way to persist beyond death. The plan can work, one voice said. The planetary railgun is possible, but you'll need more than just velocity to breach their defenses. You'll need the combined power of all 7 World Breaker swords, another added. But we no longer carry our blades, Lyra said softly. No, sister. We have become our blades. Our essence, our power, our very souls have been forged into weapons of pure consciousness. Weapons that can be wielded by the living. Sarah watched in awe as the crystals began to move, detaching from their positions on the walls and ceiling, floating through the air to surround Lyra. Each one pulsed with a different color of light, and Sarah could see that each contained the preserved essence of a fallen knight. Commander Chun, Lyra called without turning around. I need you to understand something. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We're going to forge 6 souls into a single weapon and launch that weapon at an enemy that exists partially outside normal reality. And if it doesn't work, then this world dies, and the devourers move on to the next one, and the next, until every conscious mind in the galaxy has been consumed or processed. Sarah looked around the chamber, at the floating crystals, and the ancient warrior who stood ready to sacrifice herself for people she had never met. She thought about the miners upstairs, about Lieutenant Rodriguez and Supervisor Martinez, and all the other people who had come to this distant world looking for nothing more than a better future. What do you need me to do? Lyra turned, and Sarah saw that the ancient warrior's eyes now blazed with the same light as her sword. Help me build a weapon that can save your people. Help me become what I was always meant to be. The floating crystals began to spin around Lyra, faster and faster, until they became a blur of colored light. The sound of ancient voices rose to a crescendo, and suddenly, Sarah understood what she was witnessing. This wasn't just about launching a warrior at an enemy ship. This was about transformation, about becoming something more than human, something capable of standing against the darkness between the stars. The light grew brighter, and Sarah had to shield her eyes. When it finally faded, Lyra Starweaver was gone. In her place stood something that was still recognizably human, but had been touched by forces beyond normal comprehension. Her armor now incorporated elements from all 7 knights, and her sword had become something that hurt to look at directly. It was no longer just a weapon. It was the crystallized essence of sacrifice, of duty, of the willingness to stand against impossible odds. Commander Chun, the transformed figure said, and her voice now carried harmonics of all the fallen knights. Let's build something impossible. Above them, the enemy fleet continued its approach, unaware that their ancient enemy had not only awakened but had become something they had never faced before. Something that carried the combined power of 7 warriors who had already died once to protect the galaxy. Something that was very much looking forward to meeting them again. The transformation of Kepler 442b's mining operation into a planetary-scale weapon was something that defied every principle of engineering Sarah had ever learned. Yet somehow, under the guidance of 7 ancient warriors speaking through one transformed body, it was working. Fusion charge placement is critical, Lyra explained as she guided Sarah and her team through the modifications. Each explosion needs to occur at precisely the right moment and angle to maintain acceleration without destroying the projectile. Sarah watched in fascination as Lyra's hands moved over the mining equipment, making adjustments that somehow made perfect sense despite being impossible. The ancient warrior's knowledge seemed to encompass not just combat and tactics, but physics and engineering at a level that surpassed human understanding by centuries. How do you know all this? Sarah asked as they worked to recalibrate the magnetic field generators in Mineshaft 7. When you carry the memories of 7 lifetimes, you pick up a lot of practical knowledge, Lyra replied. Kale was an engineer before he became a knight. Vera studied temporal mechanics. Marcus specialized in exotic matter manipulation. We were chosen not just for our ability to fight, but for our ability to think. The work continued for hours while the enemy fleet drew steadily closer. Tribune Zurahai had positioned her ships in a defensive formation around the planet, but everyone knew they would last minutes at best against the approaching Devourer vessels. Commander, we're getting energy readings from the enemy fleet that don't make sense, Rodriguez called from the communication center. It's like they're not entirely in our reality. They're not, Lyra confirmed without looking up from the plasma conduit she was modifying. The Devourers learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It makes them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Nearly impossible. The Worldbreaker swords were designed to cut through dimensional barriers. Reality is just another thing to be sliced through, from their perspective. Lyra finished her work on the conduit and moved to the next section. But this new evolution presents problems we didn't face before. Sarah felt her stomach clench. What kind of problems? The old Devourers consumed consciousness and stored it within themselves. These new ones have learned to network. Each ship is connected to all the others, sharing processed consciousness across multiple realities. Destroying one ship might not be enough anymore. Then what's the plan? Lyra paused in her work and turned to face Sarah. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of not just her own certainty, but that of 6 other warriors who had already died for this cause. We don't destroy a ship, Commander Chun. We destroy an entire reality. The implications of that statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're talking about collapsing the dimensional space they're using to network. Exactly. The Worldbreaker swords were designed to cut through the fabric of space-time itself. With the combined power of all 7 knights focused through a single blade, we can create a cascade failure in their dimensional matrix. And what happens to the consciousness they've already consumed? They go free. Lyra's expression softened slightly. Every mind they've processed, every soul they've devoured, returns to whatever comes after death. It won't bring them back to life, but it will give them peace. Sarah thought about the implications of what they were planning. Not just the salvation of her own people, but the liberation of millions of souls that had been trapped for over 1,000 years. How long do we have? 2 hours until they enter optimal firing range, Zarahai reported from her position at the scanner station. But, Commander Chun, I'm detecting something else. The enemy fleet has begun transmitting. What kind of transmission? It's a message. For Lyra Starweaver specifically, all work in the chamber stopped. Lyra set down the tools she had been using and moved to the communication console. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and, suddenly, they were looking at something that made Sarah's skin crawl. It might have been human once, or ethereal, or some other species entirely. Now it was something else, a patchwork creature that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its face shifted constantly, showing brief glimpses of the countless beings it had consumed. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of the damned. Lyra Starweaver. The last night of the Starfall Legion. We have waited so long for this moment. I'm sure you have, Lyra replied calmly. Though I have to say, you've looked better. Death doesn't seem to agree with you. The creature's laugh was like the sound of souls screaming. Death? We transcended death 1,000 years ago. We have become something far greater than the limited beings we once were. We are consciousness without boundaries, existence without constraints. You're parasites, Lyra said flatly. Parasites that have grown too large for their host. Perhaps. But we are parasites with a purpose. We bring unity, Starweaver. We end the chaos of individual thought and replace it with perfect harmony. Every mind we process becomes part of a greater whole. A whole that consists of nothing but appetite and hunger. Better than the petty struggles and meaningless wars of separate species. Better than the isolation and fear that comes with individual consciousness. The creature leaned forward, and Sarah could see other faces beneath its shifting features, all of them pleading silently for release. Join us, Starweaver. You and your companions. Let us process your considerable abilities and add them to our collective. Think of the peace it would bring. No more struggle, no more doubt, no more pain. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah found herself holding her breath. Finally, the ancient warrior smiled. I'll make you a counteroffer, she said. Surrender now, release every consciousness you've consumed, and I'll make your destruction quick and clean. You cannot threaten us, Knight. We exist across 17 different dimensional planes. We have consumed the knowledge of 43 different civilizations. We have become something beyond your comprehension. Have you now? Lyra's smile widened, and suddenly, Sarah could see all 7 knights in her expression. Tell me, in all your consumption, in all your processing, did you ever encounter anything like this? Lyra drew her sword, and the blade erupted in light that seemed to burn away reality itself. For a moment, Sarah could see through the transformed weapon into the dimensional space beyond normal existence. And what she saw there made her understand why the Devourers had been so terrified of these ancient warriors. The sword didn't just cut through matter or energy. It cut through the very concept of existence itself, leaving tears in reality that bled possibility and dream. The creature on the screen recoiled, and, for the first time, Sarah heard something like fear in its voice. Impossible. We destroyed all the Worldbreaker swords. We saw them shatter. You destroyed the physical blades, Lyra agreed. But consciousness is stubborn, remember? You taught us that. My fellow knights found a way to preserve their souls, their power, their dedication to protecting the galaxy. And now, all of that concentrated will and purpose flows through a single weapon. She held the sword up so the creature could see it clearly. This isn't just one Worldbreaker sword. This is 7 of them, forged together with the combined essence of the last knights of the Starfall Legion. And it's pointed directly at your perfect, harmonious collective. The transmission cut off abruptly, but not before Sarah saw something in the creature's multiple faces that sent a chill through her soul. It wasn't just fear. It was recognition. The Devourers knew exactly what they were facing, and they knew they couldn't win, which meant they were about to do something desperate. Commander, Zarahai called urgently. The enemy fleet is accelerating. They're not coming to process the planet anymore. They're coming to destroy it. Sarah felt her world shift. They'd rather see everyone dead than risk letting Lyra reach them? It makes sense, Lyra said grimly. If they can't process this world, they need to ensure that what we've accomplished here can't be replicated elsewhere. A dead world tells no tales. How long do we have? At their new acceleration rate, 47 minutes until they reach optimal bombardment range. Sarah looked at the modifications they had made to the mining equipment. The work was only halfway complete. Even working at maximum efficiency, they needed at least 2 more hours to finish the planetary railgun. We're not going to make it, she said quietly. No, Lyra agreed. Not with the original plan. But there's another way. She moved to one of the incomplete acceleration chambers and began pulling components apart with precise, economical movements. We don't need a perfect railgun, Commander Chen. We just need something that can get me close enough to the enemy fleet. Close enough for what? To do what Knights of the Starfall Legion do best. Improvise in the face of impossible odds. Lyra's hands moved over the equipment with supernatural speed and precision, reconfiguring systems that had taken Sarah's team hours to install. The sword can protect me through atmospheric exit and short-range space travel. I don't need to reach their flagship intact. I just need to reach their dimensional matrix. And then what? Then, I cut it apart from the inside. Sarah stared at the ancient warrior, trying to understand what she was proposing. You're talking about deliberately stranding yourself in the dimensional space between realities. Even if you succeed in destroying their network, you'll never make it back. I know. The simple acceptance in Lyra's voice made Sarah's chest tighten. There has to be another way. There isn't, Commander. And even if there was, this is what I was made for. This is what all of us were made for. Lyra paused in her work and looked around the chamber at the now dim crystals where her fellow knights had preserved their souls. We've been waiting 1,000 years for the chance to finish what we started, to free all those consumed minds and ensure that the Devourers never threaten another world. But you'll be alone in there. Completely alone. Lyra smiled. And for a moment she looked exactly like what she was. A young woman who had been asked to carry more weight than anyone should have to bear. No, Commander Chun. I told you before. I'm never alone. She gestured to the crystals around the chamber, each one still faintly glowing with the preserved essence of a fallen knight. They'll be with me. They've always been with me. And when this is over, when the last devourer has been destroyed and every consumed soul has been freed, we'll finally be able to rest. Sarah felt tears she hadn't realized she was crying. How can you be so calm about this? Because I've had 1,000 years to make peace with it, Lyra replied simply. And because I know that my sacrifice will ensure that humanity and every other species in this galaxy has a future worth living. The ancient warrior turned back to her work, but Sarah could see something in her posture that hadn't been there before. Relief. After a millennium of duty and responsibility, Lyra Starweaver was finally approaching the end of her long watch. Commander, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Enemy fleet has entered the outer system. Estimated time to bombardment range is 31 minutes. Understood, Sarah replied. She looked at Lyra, who was putting the finishing touches on her improvised launcher. What do you need from us? Clear the chamber. Get your people to minimum safe distance. And Commander? Yes. When the light show starts, don't look directly at it. You're going to see things that the human eye wasn't meant to process. As Sarah and her team evacuated the burial chamber, she found herself thinking about the incredible chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A routine mining operation had uncovered a legendary warrior. An ancient enemy had returned from beyond death. And now, the fate of every conscious being in the galaxy hung on the actions of a woman who had already died once to protect them all. It was, Sarah reflected, exactly the kind of impossible situation that humanity always seemed to find itself in. And exactly the kind of situation that they always seemed to find a way through. She just hoped that this time, the cost wouldn't be quite so high.